Hello, it's Mr. Johnson here, and we are talking about another episode of the Artist Gallery. If you are in my class, make sure you have your sketchbook, your artist images, scissors, and a glue stick ready so that we can make our sketchbook page with this week's artist. So who are we talking about this week? One of my absolute favorites, Vincent van Gogh. He is going to be our artist for this week. So make sure you take out the Van Gogh page. We can start cutting out the pictures that go along with him, and you can paste those into your sketchbook. And then as the notes come up on the screen for each image, we can write those down. Of course, if there's anything else that you're interested in during this discussion, feel free to jot that down as well. So while you're cutting and pasting those pictures, let me give you a little bit of background information. Vincent van Gogh is a Dutch artist from the Netherlands whose style is post-impressionism. He became involved with the impressionist style of painting and then kind of moved on, did his own version of it. After that, we'll talk about that again in a little minute. Picture went away. He was born March 30th, 1853 in Zundert, don't know how to say that, in the Netherlands, and he died July 29th of 1890. So he wasn't that old. And he only painted for the last few years of his life. So it's not like he spent decades painting. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. Van Gogh is not the way you would pronounce his name because he is Dutch from the Netherlands. The GH at the end of his name would be more like a H sound. So his name would have been pronounced Vincent van Gogh. Van Gogh is the Americanized way to pronounce his name. So I still say it all the time, even though I know that the real way to pronounce his name would be Vincent van Gogh. So Van Gogh. His art became astoundingly popular after his death. He is one of the artists who is kind of the quintessential tortured artist. He had a terrible life, and we'll talk all about the horrible things that happened to him and by him during his life. And it's unfortunate that he never lived to see his fame or success. It all happened after he died. We also know so much about him because of the letters that he published between him and his brother, Theo. So he would write constantly about his paintings, about his life. So we have all of that information. It really gives us a good insight into who Vincent was as a person. He was the eldest of 6 children, born to a Protestant pastor, born and raised in a small village in the south of the Netherlands. Vincent was named after an older brother who was stillborn. So he died, at birth, named Vincent, and when his parents had another son, they named him Vincent as well. So he's already named after a dead older brother, which is not a great way to start out your life. Feels kind of like a replacement child. He was a quiet, self-contained youth, spending his free time wandering the countryside and observing nature. He had a lot of different jobs. At 16, he was an apprentice to his uncle's art dealership, but he didn't like that, so he left. He worked as a language teacher and a preacher in England and a bookseller in the Netherlands. He worked as a pastor and he gave away all of his worldly goods and was dismissed by the church. So he was fired or quit from every other job that he had. None of them seemed to fit him. So, kind of failed at a lot of these other careers. His approach to life darkened when the love of his life was rejected by a London girl in 1874. He professed his love, and she very quickly turned him down, and that kind of started to lead him down a dark path. His artistic career lasted only 10 years, from 1880 to 1890, the year that he died. During the first 4 years of that time, he mostly did watercolors and drawings. And it wasn't until he visited Paris with his brother Theo and met the Impressionist painters that he really started to develop the style that he's best known for. After 2 years, Van Gogh then became tired of city life. He was physically exhausted. He wanted to just be out among nature. So he leaves and goes to Arles in France. So Arles is a town in southern France, which is where Van Gogh does most of his famous paintings. So all the ones on the screen were all done there. So this is I think his most famous image, one of my favorite paintings of all time. In the first image you should include for your notes, this is The Starry Night. Definitely one of the most famous paintings ever created. So this is painted during a time when Vincent stayed in an asylum for the mentally insane in Saint Remy de Provence at the end of April in 1889. Fearful that he was losing his mind, he asked to be shut up in the asylum. So he goes to the asylum and he says, like, I need to be in here. Vincent had a lot of problems. He was mentally insane, and not like, oh, dude, you crazy. Like he had a lot of real issues. He was not a very nice person. He was someone walking down the street, like you would go the other way to avoid him. He was odd and crazy. But he checked himself into an asylum for the mentally insane where he stayed on and off for 2 years. And this painting, The Starry Night, is based on the view he saw outside of his asylum window. It was painted in 1889, and it is currently on display in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. So I've been there. You get to see the original. It's really cool. I'm going to move these off of the screen for a second so that we can see the whole picture. So based on the view outside of his window in the asylum for the mentally insane, this painting is about how small we are compared to the vastness of the universe. So right outside of his window is a cypress tree. That is the big dark shape on the left. That is a cypress tree. Then we see a very small town. This is the town of Arles in France, off in the distance. So a very small town that's off in the distance, some rolling hills behind that, and then this vast night sky with this crescent moon, all of these glowing stars, and then the swirling clouds and wind in the sky. Vincent's kind of key stylistic element are these wild brush strokes that we can see throughout the sky and the tree and the buildings down at the bottom. He's known for this. He would paint ferociously, quickly, globbing and layering the paint on the canvas. Now, he often spent his only money on paint and paint supplies. His brother Theo would send him an allowance each week because Vincent had no money when he moved to Arles in France, and he's in the mental asylum. He has no job, no income, right, no money. So his brother sends him a little allowance, right, whatever he can afford. And Vincent would often have to decide whether he would spend that money on food or on paint, and it often went to paint. There are written records of times where Vincent ate oil paint directly out of the tube. And in the 1880s, oil paint was made with things like lead and arsenic. So not only was he already, suffering from a lot of mental illness, but he then gave himself lead poisoning by eating this poison paint right out of the tube, like a go-gurt. Disgusting. Do not do that. That is very dangerous. I think this painting is absolutely beautiful, and it's showing the very small town. So the people in here are minuscule. You can't see any people in the picture. They would be tiny, and this vast sky of stars would be huge. And he's known for talking about the stars as like places on a map. He said to his brother that you can take a train to get from place to place, but you take death to reach the stars. And then shortly after this, he does commit suicide. But I do think it is an absolutely beautiful painting. So next, let's take a look at another one of my favorites called Cafe Terrace at Night, painted in 1888, also on display in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, which you can go in and visit these. So this shows kind of the quintessential style that Vincent is known for, these bright, bold colors, and then this impressionistic way that he would glob the paint on the surface. You can actually go to this cafe. It is in, the town of Arles. You can go there, and you can, by looking at the painting, you can see where he stood when he painted this. It's a fairly accurate description of this scene, which I think is really cool. But I think it's really beautiful. And these bright yellow colors complement the blues of the sky and the buildings. So this whole, cafe here really pops out, and the textures are just beautiful. I think it really captures the feeling of kind of the French nightlife, which is really, really cool. Okay, so let's look at, this is not one that you have in your pictures, but just to show you kind of that style, this is the same kind of cypress tree that's in The Starry Night but now it's depicted during the daytime in the way he's layered these clouds with whites and blues, aquas, and pale butter yellow is beautiful. These are wheat fields that he would see, in the countryside in France. So his life was very difficult. He didn't have, a lot of friends. Most people who met him didn't like him. He, was crazy. He was dirt poor. He had no money except for this measly allowance that his brother sent him. And his life, was definitely difficult. But one of my favorite groups of paintings that Vincent does are these sunflowers. So you have one sunflower image. It's this one on the right that's included in your packet. Sunflowers painted by Vincent van Gogh in 1888. Now, he paints dozens of pictures of these sunflowers. He had a few vases that he would keep in his home, and he would paint them over and over again. I think they're really, really beautiful. There's a wide array of different compositions and color palettes that he would use, but a lot of these are incredibly famous. And now, one single painting by Vincent van Gogh might sell for over $100 million. So for a man who had no money while he lived, he never got to see his paintings, sell for this incredible sum of money. One of the things I love about the sunflowers in particular is that it kind of shows a lot of Vincent's mental state in these flowers. What do I mean by that? It's just a vase of flowers. Well, often you think of flowers as beautiful, right, subjects. Oh, look at these beautiful flowers. But in Vincent's paintings, a lot of the flowers are drooping, dying, wilting, right? He even kind of makes sunflowers sad in a lot of his paintings. And I feel like that's a really good way to kind of get to know this artist who had this really difficult and terrible life. Here are two more examples of other sunflower paintings. Again, if you like these, you can Google them. There are dozens of them. Some are very similar. Some are quite different. But even look at these flowers here are drooping. The petals are drooping down. These are not happy flowers. These flowers are not thriving, right? They are wilting in this vase. And I think that is a great metaphor for Vincent and his life. The other thing that he paints very often is himself. So this is the final image that you have for Vincent van Gogh. And this is one of his self-portraits is the one you have. There are many. These both painted in 1889. Over the last 10 years of his life, Vincent painted, again, dozens and dozens of self-portraits. And you can kind of see his mental state in those pictures as he goes in and out of clarity and sanity. The one on the right is probably the most iconic self-portrait by Vincent. But they show a lot of the things happening to him. The one on the left here shows him with his bandaged ear. So Vincent van Gogh is the artist who cuts off his ear. The story behind that is, according to documentation, he gets into an argument with another artist named Paul Gauguin. And he argued with Gauguin and reportedly chased him with a razor, and then he cut off the lower part of his ear. So not the entire thing, just the bottom part. He slices it off with a razor blade. And then we know that this is true because it was reported in the local French news the next day in the newspaper. Apparently in the middle of the night, he went to the local brothel, prostitute house. And he knocks on the door in the middle of the night. It's raining. And he asks for a woman named Rachel, who we believe was one of his favorite prostitutes. And he gives her, wrapped up, the bloody stump of his ear that he cuts off. And he says, "Guard this object with your life." And then he leaves, right? He's insane. So fails at his careers when he's younger. He has no success as an artist. He only sells one painting for a small sum while he's alive. Only one. No one liked his artwork or his style while he was living. So they thought his art was bad. He couldn't sell his art. No friends, no social life. Cuts off parts of his ear, gives it to a prostitute, spends 2 years in and out of a mental asylum for the insane. And then in 1890, he commits suicide. In despair of ever being able to overcome his loneliness, Van Gogh shoots himself outside in a wheat field. He walks outside, shoots himself in the chest. But he did not die immediately. He even fails at suicide. He was found wounded in his bed. So he goes outside in the wheat field, shoots himself in the chest, misses all of his vital organs, walks back to his house, hole in his chest, and is found in his bed. He's found and he says, "I shot myself. I only hope I haven't botched it." And then that evening, when interrogated by police officers, Vincent refused to answer questions, saying, "What I've done is no one else's business. I'm free to do what I like with my own body." And Vincent died 2 days later. He shoots himself in the chest, and it takes him 2 days to die from blood loss. Then Theo, his brother, died 6 months later. They were very close, through these letters, and Theo's remains were moved to Vincent's gravesite, and they were buried next to each other. So what a terrible, terrible life that this, sad, angry man had. Here are 2 other examples of his self-portraits, and you could see how his personality shifts while he paints them. I think his artwork is incredible, but very, very sad. So I have this video clip. If you have never seen this, this is a clip from the TV show Doctor Who. It's a British show where Doctor Who is a time-traveling alien. That's beside the point. But in this one episode, he meets Vincent van Gogh, played by this actor. I don't know his name, but he's wonderful. And he takes Vincent and they time travel to the present day to show him that his artwork is being admired and loved by millions. It's a beautiful scene. It's only a few minutes long, and I want to play this for you because even though it's from a fantasy TV show, it's really, really wonderful. So here's the beginning of it right here.
Where are we?
Paris, 2010 AD, and this is the mighty Musée d'Orsay, home to many of the greatest paintings in history.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Ignore that, I've got something more important to show you.
Take all your chances while you can. Never know when they'll pass you by. Like a sum the mathematician cannot solve. Like me, trying my hardest to explain. It's all about your crossing kisses, those first steps that I can't calculate.
Mr. Black? Yes. We met a few days ago. I asked you about the church and a verse.
Oh, yes. Glad to be of help. You were nice about my tie.
Yes. And today is another cracker, if I may say so. But I just wondered, between you and me, in 100 words, where do you think Van Gogh rates in the history of art?
Well, big question. But to me, Van Gogh is the finest painter of them all. Certainly the most popular great painter of all time. The most beloved. His command of color, the most magnificent. He transformed the pain of his tormented life into ecstatic beauty. Pain is easy to portray, but to use your passion and pain to portray the ecstasy and joy and magnificence of our world, no one had ever done it before. Perhaps no one ever will again. To my mind, that strange, wild man who roamed the fields of Provence was not only the world's greatest artist, but also one of the greatest men who ever lived.
Vincent, sorry. I'm sorry. Is it too much?
No. They are tears of joy. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Sorry about the beard.
It's all about your crossing kisses,
So, okay, well, this is nothing. We don't need that. But look, I don't know what happens to us after we die. You know, I have no idea. But it's a shame that Vincent never lived to see how much his work is loved and appreciated by people, since his passing, because he is considered one of the greatest, most famous, most successful artists, even though while he was alive, he had the worst life. He failed at every other career. He was named after a dead brother. He ate oil paint out of the tube and gave himself lead poisoning. He was, insane. He spent 2 years in and out of an asylum for the mentally insane. He cuts off part of his ear, gives it to a prostitute. He has no money for food. He's starving. He's mean. He has no friends, no, relationships. Couldn't sell his work. No one liked his art, and died thinking he was a failure. And now, his paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars and are some of the most sought after artworks ever created. So it's, I hope, who knows what happens to us when we die, but, it'd be nice if Vincent was able to know that. So it's why I love that scene from that show. It's just thinking that it might be possible, to someday find out what people think about us, after we're gone is amazing. Anyway, as a painter, he is definitely one of the greatest. His senses of color and texture and the way he applies the paint is just incredible. I love all of his paintings. He also painted ferociously. He has thousands of artworks, thousands of them. So if you like any of his things, please Google him, look at tons of his other artworks. I was only able to show you the bare bones of what he's created, but his body of work is just immense. It's incredible. So for my classes, we have a journal prompt now to answer when we add our artist page to our assignment on the Google Classroom. And the text blocks tell me, what can we learn about you by looking at your self-portraits? Right, by looking at Vincent's portraits when he paints himself, we can really see kind of his state, his personality, what's happening in his life. Selfies are the current self-portraits, right? Selfie is even short for self-portrait. So, when you have, these pictures of yourself, whether it's for social media or whatever it is, send it to a friend. What can we learn about you by looking at them? Right now we are studying Vincent by looking at his portraits. So what can we learn about you by looking at your self-portraits? I hope you enjoy this. If you have questions about Vincent van Gogh or anything else, please don't hesitate to let me know.